According to the Oxford Dictionary, a cult is described as the following: a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. Today, we'll dive into the story of this man. This is Rajneesh Chandra Mohan Jain, also known as Bagwan or Osho. In the 1970s, 80s and 90s, he was a very well-known spiritual leader from India, his popularity stretching all over the world. He was a rather eccentric figure. His teachings amassed a following of over 400,000 people who lived in communities all around the world, and even built an entire city in Oregon in the United States. These communities were not only a haven of free spirits, love, music, parties and healthy traditions, but also sported controversies such as sexual abuse, neglect and violence. Most famously is the city they built in Oregon called Rajneeshpuram, portrayed in the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country, which existence was tied to cases of bribery, bioterrorism and attempted murder. A lesser known chapter of the Osho story, however, is how his followers rediscovered the drug ecstasy, also known as Molly, introduced it to Amsterdam, London and Ibiza, and helped shaping the rave culture we know nowadays. This time in history, the cult that brought ecstasy to Amsterdam. Osho, named Rajneesh Chandra Mohan Jain, was born on December 11, 1931 in Kuchwada, India. He spent his early years with his grandparents, who gave him a lot of freedom in an otherwise more conservative Indian culture. It is also here where he met his first follower, his grandmother. She was a huge fan of her grandson, fostering his path to become a spiritual leader. Bagwan was described as an intelligent but rebellious child. Mostly the rebellious part would show later. At the age of 7, his grandfather passed away, which gravely impacted him. When at the age of 15 his girlfriend passed away as well due to typhoid, he became greatly preoccupied with death, which shows throughout his behaviors and teaching in his further life. At 19 he began studying philosophy, but his rebellious nature soon got him expulsed. After a conflict with an instructor, he had to change universities. At the age of 21, he claims to have reached a state of enlightenment while sitting under a tree. What is enlightenment exactly? Well, it's difficult to say. It exists in many different religions and ideologies. In Hinduism, it is described as a divine, transcendent experience. Sometimes it's described as a sudden, transformative moment of awakening, and other times it is seen as a more gradual process of being liberated from the bondage of the mind. Just to be clear, Bhagwan was not a Hinduist. He rejected any traditional religion. Funnily enough, throughout his youth, Bhagwan also developed an interest in communism, creating a library with all known works of communism. I say funnily enough because at the height of his following, he owned over 90 Rolls-Royce cars and had a collection of Rolexes worth well over $1 million. But also this was part of his teachings. Bagwan went on and finished his studies in 1957, securing a job as a teacher of philosophy at the same university. Within 2 years, he made it to professor. It is described that he was a very popular professor at his university. Simultaneously to his teachings at the university, he took his teachings out on the road as well. He traveled all across India as Acharya Rajneesh, Acharya meaning so much as teacher or professor. He gave critical lectures on Gandhi, socialism, sexual freedom, and many other topics. So what has all of this got to do with ecstasy? Well, we're slowly getting there. First, we need to understand how he gained such a devoted and some would argue cult-like following. Early 1970, Rajneesh or Bagwan introduced his technique of dynamic meditation at a meditation event in India. His dynamic version involved breathing techniques. Breathworks, nowadays a popular meditation technique, find its roots in India, where it has been practiced for millennia. It is also around this time that he gained his first real disciples, calling themselves sannyasins. Sannyasins were noticeable by their saffron-colored robes, and they wore a medallion which bore a photo of Bhagwan Rajneesh. They also changed their name as they joined the group. Bagwan was clear from the start to his disciples. They should not revere him, as he was just a catalyst to convey a message. Or in his words, I am a sun encouraging a flower to open. His secretary by the name of Lakshmi became his first disciple. She was introduced to him by her father, a wealthy man and devout follower of Rajneesh. Lakshmi, who changed her name to Ma Yoga Lakshmi, became one of the most important figures in the Sannyasin movement throughout its existence. She convinced Bagwan to stop traveling around and instead settle down in one set place from where he could further grow the movement. And so they did, first in the Woodlands apartment in Mumbai. From this moment on, he rarely traveled, but rather received visitors in his apartment. It is also here that he changed his name from Acharya Rajneesh to Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, the title he would become world famous with. The early 1970s saw an influx of young Western travelers from the West seeking spiritual enlightenment. The immense increase in wealth that had occurred after the Second World War in many Western nations, combined with a rebellious culture against older beliefs and religions, had sprouted a hippie culture, a culture mostly focused on spiritual fulfillment. If you think about it, this generation, known as the baby boomers, for the demographical boom the immense amount of births following the Second World War had caused, was the first generation in a very long time for who the bigger part did not have any material needs. After rebuilding, most Western nations had achieved a peaceful society without much extreme poverty or hunger, at least for the growing middle and upper classes. And so the lucky children of these middle and upper classes managed to travel the world seeking spiritual enlightenment, and many ended up in, you guessed it, India. Bagwan gained his first Western followers with means, wealth. At the same time in Mumbai, Bagwan developed some health issues, mainly asthma and allergies. So when a Greek shipping heiress joined, she bought a new home for the sannyasins in the city of Pune. This was dubbed Ashram Pune. An ashram is a traditional home for spirituality in India, a kind of monastery. The core members of the group moved to the 2.6 acres area with 2 houses built on it. And here the movement grew big, very big. It is estimated that around the time of the move to the new terrain in 1974, the movement had between 4,000 and 5,000 followers. And 6 years later, in 1980, the group consisted of over 100,000 followers worldwide, flocking to the relatively tiny community in the city of Pune and creating many other communities around the world, like in Amsterdam. The group had grown so big that they felt the need to build a worldwide ashram that would house thousands of people who would live together in harmony. The idea was that this city would house 50,000 people at one point. In India, many plans were made but also thwarted. The spiritual and mostly sexual freedom of its members made the group not very popular in the country, and therefore they looked to the West, to be exact, the state of Oregon in the United States of America. The group bought a 100 square mile or 260 square kilometer piece of land in the county of Wasco in Oregon. Its destined use, agriculture, and although the sannyasins definitely wanted to provide for themselves, they also had other plans with the piece of land, namely to build a city for their movement, including housing, agriculture, schooling, a police force, and even an airport. And yes, they made it all happen, including their own airline, Air Rajneesh, operating out of their own airport. The city was shrouded in troubles, as the locals from the nearby town of Antelope, population 47, felt overwhelmed and threatened. The story of the city, from its conception to its decline, is an incredible one, and way too much to get into in this video. I can highly recommend the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country to learn more. Its story included bioterrorism, politics, shady business, mass migration of homeless people, and much more. So can we speak of a cult when we talk about the sannyasins? Let's take a look at life inside of the community for a second. Although many of the what I would describe as core group had gone to Pune in India and joined the movement in person, the real growth came by audio-visual expansion. What I mean by that is that in the small monastery in Pune, the Bagwan had also built a studio to videotape his teachings, lectures, and meditation sessions, which were sold all over the world and very popular in the West. And they came at a price, of course. Apart from every session within the community, such as teachings, meditation sessions, or even one-on-one time with the Bagwan, members also usually had to pay up. Besides that, there was time for worshipping. Worshipping was basically anything that involved work around the community. Farming, cleaning, building, construction, all for nothing but the love of the community, of course. You were only welcome to live with the communities on invitation. Many devoted followers offered their work, wealth, or profession to get in. Here's an excerpt from a young lady arriving at the Oregon ranch of Rajneeshpuram. She was among the first 1,000 to build the ranch, which housed 6,000 people at its peak. She had burned through her savings to get there, was feeling ill, and just undertook a long travel to get to the ranch. Beginning of the citation. I just wanted to go somewhere warm and perhaps sit down on a comfortable couch and relax and have a cup of tea. But I soon found out there was much to do. We had to be processed. First thing was to go to a place they call Pythagoras. Each place had a special name like that. I thought it was kind of cute. Pythagoras turned out to be the name of the medical clinic. Later on, I came to realize that a lot of locations had these names as a sort of camouflage. We were not supposed to say clinic. We were only to refer to it as Pythagoras, because it must not become known to any outsiders that the clinic existed. The other Ma and I filled out some standard-looking questionnaires. Then a female sannyasin doctor took us both into a small examining room where we sat down to receive what I imagine is a standard spiel for new arrivals. The first 10 to 15 minutes of the spiel was about sexual hygiene, mainly stressing not to have sex with anyone on the ranch until we had our tests and were cleared, which would take at least a week. When it was okay, our names would appear on a special list that would be posted on the bulletin board at the Magdalena dining hall. Oh my god. And it was strongly advised that we not have any sexual relations with anyone not a resident of the ranch, whether sannyasin or not. One other issue that was stressed was the number of people living there. We mustn't be discussing the true number. Later on, I learned it was 1,000. Officially, it was only 250. Approximately the next 10 minutes of the spiel was about devotion to Bagwan and his work. Especially stressed was no gossiping. Especially stressed was to watch your conversation around outsiders, to be careful what you said over the telephone as it might be tapped, and even to watch what you wrote in outgoing mail. I wondered, am I at an ashram or am I in a coma hallucinating a scene from a James Bond movie? It was truly cloak and dagger. We then had our VD tests. The doctor never noticed how sick I was. End of the excerpt. I'll be sure to post the full article down below for those who want to read about her entire experience in Rajneeshpuram. Besides the main ashrams in Pune and later in Oregon, followers of Bhagwan started many other communities worldwide, each with their own goals and members, but all of them having the ideas of Osho at the core of their existence. And there was also the one in Amsterdam. These are images of the infamous inauguration of the former Dutch Queen of the Netherlands, Beatrix. With her inauguration inside being a gathering of the world's rich and powerful, outside a war was going on, a war of the people. Organized groups of squatters had warned for a long time to cause much trouble during the coronation. This marks the beginning of the 1980s in Amsterdam, a city in demise. Large industry had left the city, unemployment was at an all-time high, massive protests against the Cold War nuclear weapons, buildings were neglected, dilapidated, a heroin epidemic had cast a hold on the city for over a decade, and at the same time, free spirits, artists, students, alternatives, immigrants of many different culture and former Dutch colonies were flocking to the city, living, learning, and clashing with each other. Amidst all of this, in the west wing of an abandoned prison complex, a small community of sannyasins, followers of the Bagwan, was founded in 1981. The group, consisting of roughly 180 people, settled down in a former prison. Their initial goal was to live together and to create a community following the ideas of Bagwan. His ideas were becoming increasingly popular, with more communities sprouting across the Netherlands. They spread the word, taught about dynamic meditation, conducted therapy sessions, and even organized a festival in a sports stadium called the Full Moon Affair, which caught nationwide attention. It was estimated that Amsterdam alone had about 10,000 sannyasins, just about the same amount of heroin addicts. An anecdote in a news article regarding the rise and fall of the sannyasin states therefore that parents had two fears when their young children moved to Amsterdam as students: heroin and the Bagwan. The aesthetic parties, orgies and meditation sessions of the Bagwan were not fueled by heroin, however, although they were not entirely fueled on life energy either. A new drug was on the rise among sannyasins, one that would change the world. In 1912, MDA was discovered for the first time. MDA, in various forms also referred to as ecstasy or molly, was discovered when looking for a medicine which would stop abnormal bleedings. As this didn't work, however, the patent was tucked away for a while. It wasn't until psychotherapist Alexander Shulgin started experimenting with the drug in 1965 that its psychoactive effects were starting to be known. He started using the drug in therapeutic sessions due to its effect of releasing any inhibitions or any boundaries in people. This is also why at first the drug was referred to as Adam, after the first man God had created, naked, without sin or desire. Adam started spreading in an underground scene of non-traditional therapists, psychologists and intellectuals. Also a group that was very represented within the sannyasin community. And so it came to be that Bhagwan's followers got involved in Adam, ecstasy, molly, MDMA, however you wish to name it. Followers of Rajneesh, starting with the therapists of the community around the world, slowly started introducing ecstasy to their meditation and therapy sessions, and later on to their parties. In Amsterdam in particular, two things came together. Across the world, the Bagwan organization owned many businesses, and in the case of the Amsterdam community, this business was a discotheque or club called Zorba the Buddha. This name was chosen from one of Bhagwan's learnings. His vision of the new man was that they would be enthusiastic of life as Zorba the Greek, yet spiritually balanced as Buddha, hence Zorba the Buddha. The discotheque was opened every night besides Monday and was dubbed the cleanest club in Amsterdam. Reason was that the establishment was considered to be a temple of the Bagwan and therefore needed to be clean. Even during the night, while people were dancing, barefoot of course, this place was thoroughly kept clean. The place was extremely popular. Every night there would be long lines at the entrance. The reason might be its exotic appearance or perhaps something else. Besides the music of Michael Jackson and other popular tunes, there was also place for music from the capital of hippie culture, Goa in India. A new music started forming there which would later be known as Goa trance. Apart from this strange trance-like music, there was also a new thing which was available in this club. You guessed it, ecstasy. The combination of the drug and the new music became an immediate hit with partygoers. Similar things started happening in other Rajneesh communities, such as the one in London and on the island of Ibiza. The exact involvement of the community in the distribution of ecstasy is unclear. Most people who dealt in MDMA were a member of the community. They stated that they did so on personal title. The drugs were supposedly coming in from a manufacturer on the United States East Coast, which was also run by sannyasins, but this was never fully confirmed. It is also generally considered that the sannyasins were the first ones to introduce ecstasy on a large scale to Amsterdam, London and Ibiza. In 1985, while ecstasy was officially banned in the US, the main city of the Bagwan movement got disbanded by government officials. Some of the movement leaders were sought after for persecution in the US, and its global popularity diminished after these events. Their local communities continued existing, however. Even the Amsterdam one exists until nowadays, although only 25 people are left of what was once the new spiritual, aesthetic and trend-setting movement. Rajneesh himself, Bagwan, had to leave the US after legal problems surrounding Rajneeshpuram and returned to India. He changed his name to Osho and carried a deep hatred towards the United States, which he loudly voiced. After exploring the possibility of buying Marlon Brando's private island for a new commune, he decided on settling back into the Pune ashram where it all started. He died aged 58, probably due to heart failure, although the community states that he merely left his mortal body and his soul lives on. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you next time in history.